Good evening, and welcome to Beacon. So, for our first episode, I thought it only fitting to talk about my first foray into what would one day be called fandom, what would one day be part of our pop culture. This podcast, this show, is about hope and optimism and the bringing of light to the darkness. And my somewhat Don Quixote like obsession with that started when I was 7 years old. And it started with a video game. Now, before we get any further into this, it is important for you to understand two things. One, video games are art. If you don't believe me, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Video games are art, and I mean that insofar as any creative endeavor, any endeavor taken upon for the sole purpose of creation is, by definition, art. And it deserves that level of respect. Video games absolutely deserve that level of respect because, for whatever reason they're made today, they were made originally to bring joy to the world. They were made to make people smile. And a lot of them are still made for that reason today. The other thing that you have to understand before we go any further is that this will not be a place of negativity. This will not be a place where we bash video games or movies or where something is going to get a bad review. That's not to say that I'm not going to be critical. Being critical and being negative are not the same thing. And that's a discussion that we're going to have. But that's not a discussion that we're going to have right now. Right now is about newness. Right now is about this new journey that we're all on together. And as this podcast grows, I hope that you'll be patient with it. I hope that you'll join this conversation and share with me and share with us what you love and what you consider art and what video game inspired you or what movie can you quote every line of. What do you love with that squealing little nerd that lives inside you? Share that with us, please. Leave a comment, post a video. Let us know where your passions lie so that we can talk about that passion and we can explore it together. For this episode, we're going to talk about The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda was originally a Japanese game. It came out on February 21st, 1986 in Japan. Conflicting reports have it coming out roughly a year later in the United States, either in July of 1987 or on August 22nd, 1987. Now, my birthday is August 22nd, so that's the date we're going to be using. I still like to think that it was a 7th birthday gift from the universe to me, and that helps. The original Japanese subtitle for the game was The Legend of Zelda, The Hyrule Fantasy. And this is important because fantasy plays a large part in not only the narrative of the game, but also in its inspiration. See, the game was created by a man named Shigeru Miyamoto, with assistance from a man named Takashi Tezuka. Both names I am butchering horribly because I'm an American, and it's what we do. Shigeru Miyamoto grew up in a province in Japan that was largely trees and wilderness when he was growing up. So he spent a lot of his formative years running through the forests and finding caves and seeing interesting creatures and doing a lot of that stuff that really we don't do a lot of these days. And he wanted to create a game that reflected those elements within his childhood, that reflected the fantastical things that he remembered about being a child and growing up amongst the forests of Japan. So he created The Legend of Zelda. And The Legend of Zelda follows very much that premise. The game opens, the original game in the golden cartridge opens up with a text crawl. And that text crawl says essentially, Ganon, Lord of Darkness, has stolen the Triforce of Power. Princess Zelda, fearing Ganon, has broken the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces and hidden them throughout the world. Find them. And that's it. That's all you get. It then opens with you playing the main character of Link, standing in a field with a shield. And that's it. You can go wherever you want, left, down, up, right, wherever. You have agency in the game. You decide where to go and how quickly to go there. You pick a direction and you're off and running. You are now exploring the forests and the mountains and the swamps and the deserts of Hyrule with no tutorial, no guide, a map that sorta kinda works, and that's it. The text crawl was followed by a small series of images from the game. This is a fairy, this is a bomb, this is a heart container, that kind of thing. But other than that, you have no help from the game whatsoever. When you first wake up as Link, there is a cave directly in front of you that you can choose to go in or not go in, however you'd like to do. If you're smart enough to go into the cave, an old man gives you a sword. And he says, it's dangerous to go alone, take this. And he gives you the sword that you're going to use for the majority of the game. But you don't have to go in the cave. You can completely skip it. You can go off to the left, off to the right, you can go down. You can completely skip that cave and never enter it through the entire game. The Legend of Zelda had a respect and a faith in its players that a lot of games don't have even to this day. It was incredibly progressive for a game to have that much faith in its audience. And in fact, the Legend of Zelda series has continued to show that level of respect and that level of appreciation for its fans over the last 30 years that it's been in existence. It started from that one golden cartridge that you plugged into the Nintendo Entertainment System and has grown into a library of 20 games. And those are just the officially licensed games from Nintendo. There are offshoots and manga and comic books that diverge and delve off from the various games within that series. And within that 20 volume series, there are only 2 direct sequels. Just 2. The original Legend of Zelda has a sequel called The Adventure of Link, which takes place, I want to say, about a year after the events of the first game. And then, and please comment below, correct me, because I will make mistakes in this video, and in all the videos to come. I am but a humble people. The only other direct sequel is to a game about halfway through the series called Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The sequel to that game is a game called Majora's Mask. Other than those 2 sequels, every other game in the series is an offshoot or a side mission, side quest, side adventure of the series. The series is unique in that it does not have the same protagonist game to game to game to game. Although they all share the name Link, it has been revealed by Nintendo that they are ancestors of one another. They are descendants of a common heritage. And it is that story. It is actually the story of Hyrule that is of this world that is being explored within these games. The games were integral to my understanding of story, to my understanding of structure, and in a lot of ways to my understanding of humor and the uses that can have. Not only did they inform me as a person, but The Legend of Zelda informed gaming as a whole. The Legend of Zelda, the gold cartridge first game, was the first game ever to utilize battery-powered saving. The battery was in the cartridge. So long as you had that cartridge, you had your game. You saved your game on that cartridge. And that was, up until that point, unheard of in gaming. Games didn't save. They were supposed to be 10, 15-minute diversions while you were waiting for something else to do. They weren't meant to be played for hours and hours, the way The Legend of Zelda was. The Legend of Zelda was the first game that was meant to be an experience. So it gave you the opportunity to have that experience for as long as you wanted. There were no clunky passwords. There were no strange, saving junctures where you would be reminded later to come back to. It was a continual process. You saved your game, and you could take your cartridge to your friend Mike's house and continue your game from exactly where you left off. It was revolutionary. The Legend of Zelda also gave us the RPG format, so you were able to organize an inventory, you were able to play with magic in the form of the ice and fire rods, you were able to have an adventure that was story-based instead of just killing things. You had medieval weapons, you fought dragons, there was a princess, you had an evil demon to kill. It was an RPG before there was such a thing as an RPG. It was also an action game because you fought in real time. You didn't wait for a menu to pop up. You hit a button and you swung your sword. That was it. You could defend with your shield. It was a real-time adventure, which RPGs didn't have, and a lot of RPGs still don't have, much to their credit, I actually think. The Legend of Zelda created entire genres of gaming, and that is not something to be taken lightly. It has traversed 30 years of gaming, and still continues to be at the very top of every top 10 games in history list you can lay your grubby little hands on. Game Informer in 2009 said of the original Legend of Zelda Gold case, quote, "No less than the greatest game of all time," end quote, on their list of top 200 games of all time. Further saying that it was, quote, "ahead of its time by years, if not decades," end quote. It has touched the lives of so many people. The latest game in the series, Breath of the Wild, came out in March and has sold 3.8 million copies worldwide. 3.8 million lives touched by a single game. That's worth a little bit of light, wouldn't you say? With that, I leave you for tonight. Thank you for listening from the Lighthouse.